In such a diverse experience that you had, what do you think was the most challenging part and how did you overcome?
I think in some dimensions, the first time I became an entrepreneur, which was with Deramati, it was imagine kind of an eBay clone for Latin America, something like that. That was in some dimensions the hardest because it was the first time I was doing it. No, it was very new. So for the first time in my life, I had to hire people. Previous to that, I had worked as a consultant with the Boston Consulting Group, which is a good consulting firm. And I had studied in Harvard Business School, which was a very good experience, but it was theoretical, right? Like it wasn't that, even though it's a case study, supposedly more practical than reading books, it still is theoretical, right? Because you're not doing it. So I think the hardest was to actually, jump into the opportunity of becoming an entrepreneur and raising money. The first round, it was the hardest by far because I had never done it. So I didn't know exactly how to do it, and we had to learn in the process and adjust very quickly. I remember we had like 150 meetings to on the phone mostly, and some in person, to raise money. It was brute force. We talked to everybody, everybody, until we actually understood what people wanted to hear and how to prepare a good presentation. It took several iterations, it took several rounds, and eventually we did it. We were able to raise the money, but both raising the money, hiring the people, building the first product, all those first experiences were particularly challenging because it was the first time being an entrepreneur and you don't know anything. You're learning while doing, right? It's like building a plane when you're flying, it's not that easy. So phenomenally gratifying. I loved it.
Building a plane when you're flying. Wow. Best way to put it. You mentioned hiring the first team and raising the first round of fundings. I think I'm also in a similar position, and many of the listeners are also in the same part. I mean, you don't know which team to find, how you will find the team members, and even after you have found them, it's your responsibility to pay their salaries on time and take care of them. And for paying the salary, you need a certainty of the next funding. So, if you're starting now, what advice would you give to the young entrepreneurs?
There's lots of things I would love that somebody told me when I was getting started. No, so some of the things would be, of course, it's very important to work a lot and be very disciplined, but it is also very important to have fun in the process. This I didn't know, and actually was the first in the office, the last to leave, worked all day, and thought that it was important that I sacrificed a lot, etc. And yeah, you have to work a lot, of course. It's you need to compete and being competitive means working very often more than the other guy. But it's also critical to have fun. I learned that when you have fun, when you're really having fun, you're enjoying yourself, the best of you comes out, and you can be a lot more productive, honest enthusiasm behind what you're doing. So I think there's a correlation between having fun, being enthusiastic, being yourself, being productive, and having impact. That's not in any business school book, it's not in the standard playbook, but making sure that you operate with a team where they can be themselves and really contribute the best they have. And in order for that to happen, they need to feel relaxed. And in order for that to happen, they need to have fun. So just making sure that you create that environment with your team where people can fail, can sometimes make fools of themselves, which is a requirement in the testing process that leads to building better things. So it's a bit counterintuitive, no? Because you have to allow failure to get to success. You have to allow people to be a bit foolish so that they can actually be super serious. And managing those ambiguities in a smart way, I think is something not very intuitive and that I would have loved somebody to tell me when I was getting started. Some of the things maybe, dream big. The sky's the limit. It sounds a bit cliche, but it's true. It takes the same 24 hours a day to do whatever it is you want to do. And you can be building the Taj Mahal, or you can be building something this big. It's up to you. So don't limit yourself. That's the other thing I would tell young entrepreneurs. Just think big, think global, think big, smile a lot, and bring over people you admire. I think the best scenario for an entrepreneur is that their team is actually better than themselves. So don't feel threatened by others. Don't feel that you need to be in control. That's hard for an entrepreneur because we are very control freaks. So at least I am. But just make sure that you actually build people who are actually better and who can complement you and bring over the skills that you don't have. Sometimes people are reluctant to do that because you feel a bit threatened or vulnerable if other people are better than you in some very clear dimensions. But that's actually the best thing you can do, so that the whole team is more effective. No? Yeah, those are a few of the things. And
Amazing.
one other thing is, don't forget that our life it may seem long. It's actually quite short. You know, you don't have time to build 100 companies in your life. If you are really, really, really kind of off the charts, you may build 3 or 4. You know, focus on doing something important. You
Dream
know?
big.
Watch full podcast on Rocklaz.
Rocklaz Radio.
Rocklaz.
Rocklaz.
Rocklaz Radio with Tanmay Shah.